Imagine a world where water, not oil, dictates the global economy. A world where nations rise and fall based on their access to fresh water. What would that mean for our lives, our societies, and the very future of humanity? Welcome to Nova Zanera. Today we're diving into a fascinating and alarming question. What if water became more valuable than oil? Let's start with where we are today. Water covers 71% of the Earth's surface, yet only 3% of it is fresh water, and less than 1% is accessible for human use. Over the years, climate change, overpopulation, and pollution have stretched this precious resource to its limit. Cities like Cape Town, South Africa, have already faced day zero, a moment when the taps literally run dry. In some regions, water scarcity is no longer a future threat, but a daily reality. Agriculture, industry, and households compete for dwindling supplies, while billions still lack access to safe drinking water. This scenario begs the question: what happens if water becomes the new oil? In a world where water is more valuable than oil, the global economy would shift dramatically. Nations like Canada, Brazil, and Russia, which have vast freshwater reserves, would become the new superpowers. These countries could control the blue-gold trade, just as oil-rich nations have dominated energy markets for decades. Conversely, water-scarce nations, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, might face unprecedented challenges. Importing water could become as common as importing oil. Imagine massive tankers, not carrying crude, but transporting freshwater across oceans. We would also see the rise of water-based black markets. Smuggling water could become as lucrative as smuggling drugs or diamonds. And just like with oil, fluctuations in water prices could destabilize economies worldwide, affecting everything from food production to energy generation. On a personal level, life as we know it would change drastically. Strict rationing could become the norm. Instead of worrying about gas prices, we might check daily water prices. Recycling and conserving water would become essential. Technologies like waterless toilets and gray water systems might become standard in every household. Luxury might be defined by access to unlimited water rather than expensive cars or gadgets. Industries, too, would need to adapt. Farming, which currently uses 70% of the world's fresh water, would undergo a revolution. Drought-resistant crops, hydroponic systems, and even lab-grown food could become the backbone of agriculture. History has shown that competition over resources often leads to conflict. If water surpasses oil in value, conflicts could arise over access to vital water sources like rivers, lakes, and aquifers. Consider the Nile River in Africa, which flows through several countries, including Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Egypt has historically relied on the Nile for almost all of its water supply, and any disruption in the river's flow could have catastrophic effects. In recent years, tensions have increased between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which Ethiopia has built on the Blue Nile. Egypt fears that the dam could reduce its water supply, leading to potential conflict. Similarly, the Ganges River, which provides water for over 400 million people in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, could become a flashpoint. Disputes over water usage and pollution control in this river have already created tensions. And as water scarcity worsens, competition for access to the river could intensify, especially between neighboring nations with differing needs. In the United States, the Colorado River, which provides water to 7 U.S. states and parts of Mexico, has been heavily overused, with dwindling water supplies causing tension between states like California, Arizona, and Nevada. If droughts worsen and water becomes more scarce, these states might be forced to compete fiercely for access to remaining supplies. In the event of a conflict over water resources, the outcome would largely depend on military capabilities and strategic control over key water sources. The more powerful nations, such as the US, China, and India, would have the upper hand due to their larger and better equipped militaries. Countries like China, with its extensive infrastructure projects like the Three Gorges Dam, could use its control over water resources as leverage in negotiations or conflicts. Similarly, India, with its large population dependent on water from the Ganges and its geopolitical influence in South Asia, would likely be a dominant force in any regional conflicts over water. On the other hand, smaller or weaker nations, many of which are already struggling with water scarcity, would likely be at a significant disadvantage. For example, Ethiopia, despite its large population, lacks the military might to stand up to Egypt if a water war were to erupt over the Nile. Similarly, smaller nations like Nepal and Bangladesh, both reliant on the Ganges and other rivers, could be easily overpowered by larger neighboring countries like India. If weaker countries lose access to water sources in a conflict, they could face severe economic and humanitarian consequences. In such scenarios, diplomacy and international pressure could become critical. For example, after losing access to the Nile, Ethiopia might need to rely on global diplomacy to secure water through treaties or international aid. Organizations like the United Nations or the African Union might intervene, offering mediations or sanctions to encourage peaceful solutions and equitable water distribution. However, the process of reclaiming water access could be slow, with weaker countries being dependent on the goodwill of the more powerful nations. In cases where diplomatic solutions fail, weaker countries might turn to alliances or international coalitions to challenge the dominant nation. For example, smaller countries along the Nile might band together and seek support from global powers or international bodies to assert their rights to water. Necessity is the mother of invention. In a water-scarce world, innovation would thrive. Desalination plants could become ubiquitous, turning seawater into drinkable water. Technologies like atmospheric water generators, which pull water from the air, could become household staples. Cities might develop closed-loop water systems, where every drop is reused and recycled. Artificial intelligence and blockchain could ensure efficient water distribution and prevent theft or wastage. Investment in water technology, such as desalination and water purification, would likely skyrocket as part of this global effort. Countries that currently lack access to clean water could partner with more developed nations to build desalination plants, water filtration systems, and infrastructure to bring water to their people. For example, nations in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which face severe water scarcity, could lead the way in global desalination efforts and help other countries develop similar technology. While these changes could bring efficiency and sustainability, there's a darker side. Would these advancements be accessible to all, or would they widen the gap between the rich and the poor? Could algorithms governing water allocation inadvertently marginalize vulnerable populations? The concentration of water wealth could create new forms of inequality. As history has shown, when a resource becomes scarce, those who control it often wield disproportionate power. So what if water became more valuable than oil? It's a scenario that could lead to either unparalleled innovation and cooperation, or devastating conflict and inequality. The battle for this precious resource could reshape our world, with nations cooperate to survive while others fighting for control. Speaking of control, imagine if AI took the reins instead of a single nation. What would that future look like? If you're curious about how AI could lead the world and what that might mean for us, click here to dive deeper into the topic. As always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.